During the Dark Ages, Christian states in Europe, and Muslim powers in the Middle East, had long been tense neighbors, and constantly at war. The Arabs, and other Muslim armies, had conquered vast territories, once home to Christian populations. Then came a storm from the east. Out of the vast grasslands of Central Asia, rose the Seljuk Turks, tough nomadic herdsmen, who lived and followed their flocks, wherever the grass led. They moved south, seeking greener pastures in Persia, as internal fighting, and overpopulation, drove them away, from their own homeland. They converted to Sunni Islam, and after a few years, shattered the Persian army at Dandanakan, and flooded into the country. In 1064, the great city of Ani fell after a brutal assault by Turkish raiders. The floodgates were opened, and massive armies poured in, slaughtering everyone in their path. Streets ran red. Women were dragged away screaming. Children were cut down, like flies. Churches were smashed, and looted. Village after village was burned, its people massacred, or marched off into slavery. Rape, pillage, and fire followed every raid. The Seljuks also devoured the countryside, shattering centuries of Christian life in Armenia and Anatolia. Pilgrims trying to reach Jerusalem were attacked, robbed, or killed. The roads to the Holy Land became paths of horror and fear. Byzantium was bleeding. Matthew of Edessa, a man who witnessed this incident at the time, described the Seljuks as bloodthirsty beasts and plagues across eastern Christendom. The real turning point came in 1071, at the Battle of Manzikert, where Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV led a massive army deep into Armenian territory to crush the Turkish threat. The two forces met on the arid plains, near Lake Van. The Seljuks, under Sultan Arslan, used their classic nomadic tactics, employing horse archers in a wide crescent formation that constantly fell back, drawing the Byzantines forward, while showering them with arrows. The Byzantines pressed on, even capturing the Sultan's camp by late afternoon. But as night fell, Emperor Romanos ordered a withdrawal, and then, betrayal struck. Part of his own army, including ethnic Turkish mercenaries, deserted. Another commander, Dukaz, abandoned the field. When the Seljuks launched another attack, the Byzantine lines collapsed in darkness and hopelessness. Romanos himself was wounded and captured. In a single afternoon, the heart of Byzantine power in Anatolia was broken. Romanos' third successor, Emperor Alexios Komnenos I, fighting endlessly for his empire's survival, finally swallowed his pride. He sent messages to the west, begging for assistance, and asking for warriors of any kind, to help push back the Turkish tide, and protect Constantinople. But his messages were largely ignored, due to the Great Schism, between Eastern and Western Christendom, which had created a rivalry, between Catholic and Orthodox churches, and also divided the authority of the Pope, over all of Christian Europe. In 1095, as the Seljuks continued to push deeper towards Constantinople, the Byzantine emperor urgently sent another message to the Pope, desperately pleading for help from his brethren in the West. However, this time, Europe answered. And nothing was ever the same again. That November, Pope Urban II stood before the Council of Clermont and cried out. He spoke of the suffering of Eastern Christians, of holy places defiled, of pilgrims murdered. He promised that all sins would be forgiven, if the Knights of the West stopped fighting each other, and instead, take the cross to Jerusalem and liberate the Holy Land. His call swept across Europe, sparking a religious uproar. Knights, lords and common people swore to travel to Jerusalem and fight for Christ. Dus Vult, Das Volt. God wills it. God wills it, the crowd clamored. The entire earth was about to witness the First Crusade. Peter the Hermit, a man who lived in northern France, was a French monk who preached the crusade across Western Europe. He gathered tens of thousands of poor peasants, common folks, untrained soldiers, and marched toward the Byzantine Empire to phase the Seljuk Turks. It was called the Peasants' Crusade, and their first target wasn't against Muslims, but Jews. Peter and his co-leader, Walter Sans-Avoir, or Walter the Penniless, led their armies into the Rhineland region of modern-day Germany, where they massacred local Jewish communities, raping and pillaging these lands, as they journeyed their way into Constantinople. To prevent further troubles from these men, the emperor hastily conveyed them into Anatolia, where they were completely wiped out by waves of Turkish armies at the Battle of Zivitat. Survivors described it as a total destruction and unexpected ambush from all sides. Hails of arrows swept through the sky, one eyewitness wrote. Simultaneously, in Europe, lords of noble houses were assembling their armies. They include Robert Curthose, Duke of Normandy, and son of William the Conqueror; Godfrey of Bouillon; Raymond IV of Toulouse; Bohemond of Taranto, tall and handsome; Robert II of Flanders; Stephen II of Blois, wealthy and famous; Hugh of Vermandois, younger brother to King Philip I of France; Tancred of Hauteville, Bohemon's nephew, handsome, and the youngest Crusader leader; Baldwin of Boulogne, younger brother to Godfrey of Bouillon; and Bishop Adhemer of Le Puy. The Byzantines had initially asked for mercenaries, but what was arriving was something far bigger and wilder. Tens of thousands of armed men, nobles, knights, foot soldiers, and even poor pilgrims, marched eastwards. When they reached Constantinople, the emperor quietly struck a deal with them. He promised total support for their mission, in exchange for the Crusaders, not to keep any conquered Byzantine territory for themselves. The Crusaders agreed, and were given food and other supplies from the local Byzantine population as they marched into Anatolia. The first major clash came at Nicaea, in the spring of 1097. The Crusaders, working with Byzantine forces, surrounded the Turkish Sultan's capital. Kilij Arslan, the Seljuks' leader, was away fighting his political rivals, while his family was trapped inside the nightmare. For weeks, the Crusaders hurled themselves at the strong walls, while Byzantine ships controlled the lake. In June, the city surrendered, not to the Crusaders, but to the emperor. The Crusaders felt cheated, as they saw it as their right to loot and plunder the city. These caused a little strain in the relationship between the Byzantines and the Crusaders. But the Crusaders noticed something strange about the Seljuk Turks. They called them swarthy, broad-faced, and narrow-eyed archers on horseback. They were short men with almond eyes, and looked nothing like Europeans, or even Arabs. From Nicaea, they marched deeper into Anatolia, in 2 columns. On July 1, under the blazing sun, near Dorylaeum, they became trapped. The Seljuks had reorganized, under their sultan, and were moving with speed, to strike the Crusaders' leading column, thinking it was the entire army. As they got closer, their horse archers swarmed like hornets, pouring arrows into the Crusader lines. The Crusaders formed a defensive circle, locking their shields, suffering terribly but holding firm. Just as the situation looked desperate, the second column, under Godfrey of Bouillon, and Raymond of Toulouse, was fast approaching in haste to join the battle. When they arrived on the field, the full Crusader host charged. The Turkish light cavalry, unused to facing heavy Western knights, in close combat, broke and fled. It was the first great open field victory. But the Crusader victory in Anatolia shocked neighboring cities. Thoros, the ruler of Edessa, summoned some Crusaders to his city, and Baldwin answered. Thoros adopted him as heir, favoring him over his own children. But in 1098, Thoros was accused of treason and thrown from the walls by an angry mob. Baldwin took these opportunity and made himself sole ruler of Edessa. The other Crusaders continued their march southwards. In October 1097, they reached the massive city of Antioch. Antioch was enormous. It was built on the left bank of the Orontes River. Its walls studded with over 400 towers, built to withstand long sieges. The Crusaders launched a siege around the city, which dragged on for 8 brutal months. Hunger began to stalk them like a second enemy. Supplies ran out. They stripped the countryside bare of any food they could find. They ate horses, dogs, roots, thistles, and even boiled leathers from shields and boots. Disease swept through the camp. Thousands died. Corpses of men were dropped by the roadside. Morale cracked. Some leaders, like Stephen II of Blois, gave up and deserted with his men. When he reached Constantinople, he told the emperor that the Crusaders were doomed and just meat waiting to be massacred. These made Emperor Alexios abandon all his support for the crusade and put more focus on securing the territories the Crusaders had already liberated. In early June 1098, Bohemond of Taranto struck a secret deal with an Armenian guard named Phyras inside the city. On the night of June 3, Phyras opened a tower gate, and the Crusaders poured in quietly at first. Then the slaughter began. They massacred the Turkish garrison and many inhabitants of the city. The whole city fell. But the citadel still held out, fighting back with everything left. 2 days later, a vast Muslim relief army under Kerboga of Mosul arrived and trapped the Crusaders inside the very city they had just taken. Famine returned, more worse than ever before, and the Crusaders again began to starve. A Provençal priest named Peter Bartholomew claimed a vision revealing the Holy Lands, which was the spear that pierced Christ, and was buried beneath the cathedral. When it was found, the Crusaders flared up, and their morale surged. On June 28, with the lands carried before them, the Crusaders marched out of Antioch in ordered divisions. But Kerboga and his mighty horde were waiting for them on the plain. The Crusader army was facing extinction. Upon sighting them, the Turks tried to envelop them with arrows and feigned retreats, even setting grass fires to choke them. But the Crusader knights charged straight into the heart of the enemy. The Turkish coalition, held together by shaky loyalties, began to unravel. One by one, contingents fled. Kerboga's mighty army had disintegrated. But Bohemond had already broken his oath to return all captured territories to the Byzantine emperor. He maintained that the emperor had broken his oath first, by failing to support the mission. Raymond of Toulouse opposed him, and the quarrel only grew worse after Bishop Adhemer of Le Puy died. His death was a major blow to the crusade, as he was the main spiritual leader who had kept the quarreling nobles working together. The dispute was finally settled when Bohemond crowned himself Prince of Antioch, while the others left and continued their march to the Holy Land. Later that year, they reached the city of Marat al-Numan. After capturing and massacring much of the population, the horror reached its lowest point. Starving crusaders, especially the poorest foot soldiers, began cutting flesh from the bodies of dead Muslims. They cooked it and ate it with desperation. Hunger had driven them to cannibalism. Survival had become everything. Italian ships brought grain and timber at the ports to feed and assist them, which the starving knights relied upon as they continued their march into the Holy Land. When they finally approached Jerusalem, what they saw was unlike anything back home. They saw a world far more mixed than they had imagined. The Fatimid defenders of the Islamic Caliphate included Arabs, Turks, and Ethiopians. The Ethiopians were dark-skinned African soldiers, mostly slaves, from sub-Saharan Africa. Slavery was rampant, and simply part of life here. The Crusaders noted that these Ethiopians, especially the males, were castrated. In early July, they finally reached the city gates, and the gaunt, sunburned, and desperate Crusaders broke down in tears of joy. They built siege towers from scavenged wood, and began attacking the city. These assaults failed at first, but they could not afford to delay further, as trees to provide shade around the city walls had been chopped down, and the wells had also been poisoned by the city's defenders. Thirst tormented them, and many of them gave up the course and fled home. On July 15th, they launched the final attack. Scaling ladders slammed against the walls. Knights and foot soldiers fought hand-to-hand on the battlements. Godfrey of Bouillon's men finally broke through near the northeast corner, while Raymond and his men advanced into the southern parts of the city. Once inside, what followed was unimaginably catastrophic. It was a slaughter. The city's defenders, both Muslims and Jews, fled toward the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. Filled with holy visions and religious fanaticism, the Crusaders chased after them. Everyone was massacred, whether they surrendered or not. Streets ran red with blood. In the temple area the killing became apocalyptic. Rivers of blood flowed through the city, rising as high as a man's knees or ankles. More than 10,000 died in that sacred temple alone. Tancred, watching these madness, rushed to protect some Muslim and Jewish refugees, gave them his banner, and begged his comrades to show mercy on them. But his message was ignored, and the Crusaders massacred them anyway. Women, children, the elderly, none of them were spared. Bodies lay in heaps, so high they had to be dragged aside, before the victors could even walk through the holy places. God has finally delivered the city into our hands, the Crusaders shouted. It was vengeance, exhaustion, and religious fury unleashed all at once. These killing spree would continue for up to 3 days. The Fatimids in Egypt sent a relief army to stop the onslaught and recapture the city, but they were crushed by the Crusaders at the Battle of Ascalon. Thank you for watching. You can support this channel simply by liking and subscribing. Tell us what you think about the First Crusade in the comments section. We hope to see you next time.